First speaker is Dr. Juliet Marshall, and she is from the University of Idaho. And you can see the title of her talk, which is Scientific Responsibilities, Standing Up When You'd Rather Crawl Under a Rock. So that's what I want to hear about right there.
Thank you, Paul. As Paul said, we have about 15 minutes, and when he first asked me to talk about this, and I was thinking, great, I get to bear all my insecurities, right? But 15 minutes is not nearly long enough to get there, so, I'll just bear a few of the insecurities. So, and the other thing you'll notice, I have to stand to the right of this, so be patient with me, because otherwise you won't be able to see me. So let me make it clear. I'm a rock crawler, okay? Matter of fact, I collect rocks. You should see the pile in my garage, pretty rocks. So I absolutely hate conflict. Just ask my husband, right? So conflict in work, in home, in family, it tends to be similar in how we deal with it. But I hate conflict. So the other thing I want to make clear, it's not about anybody else but you. And why do I say that? It's how you respond to the challenges laid out before you. You can respond emotionally, or you can respond intelligently, or like me, try to mix it all up. But the first tendency is to respond emotionally, and that's the hardest thing to control. So yes, it is all about you, and some of the strategies that you learn to deal with conflict applies in a lot of different situations. So given the topic, I was thinking a lot. So the first thing I thought to do, what do I do when I'm talking to a group of people? Normally, you try to identify who's in your audience and what are their objectives. And the reason why I put those pretty birds there, it's like birds of a feather flock together, right? We automatically tend to think and assume that people that are around us think like we do. And in most cases, in social situations, we surround ourselves with people of like-mindedness. So yeah, definitely, birds of a feather do flock together, and we are like-minded. So oftentimes we're in a situation where we're preaching to the choir. But even when we're preaching to the choir, oftentimes there's people listening, other people listening outside of that conversation. And so I like to remind myself, like I guess mothers always do, be aware of what you're saying, be kind at all times, be respectful. And I think that's a huge, even when we're talking with people that are very friendly and on the same birds on a wire, okay? Don't ridicule. And a lot of things always come back to communication. But ridicule like somebody that you know won't agree with you is listening. But we tend to ridicule when we know that we can vent and get away with it. But preaching to the choir is one part of the audience. The other part of the audience is undecided. You don't know who those people are in the audience, and undecided can show at any point in time. I've been in group sessions. Okay, I'm from Idaho, but I grew up in Delaware. I'm educated, probably overeducated, and so we tend to be a little bit more open-minded than, say, a farmer in Idaho that I work with. And so you are automatically placed into a situation where you start to not know what their opinions are. But I can guarantee you, sitting in a big group of farmers up at the convention, at the Tri-State Convention for wheat growers, you got to be watching what you're saying to make sure that you're trying not to offend people. But if the audience is undecided, it also opens a door. So it opens the door to know that you're somewhat like-minded, but often cases your professional opinion might be very different than the people surrounding you. So sitting at a table, at a convention, at the banquet, a grower's wife says, well, climate change, you don't believe in that, do you? Well, yeah, I kind of do. Oh, then you look at that as an opportunity for discussion, because they might not have their mind made up, but they are willing, because they know you, to listen and incorporate what you think. They're willing to be a little bit more open, even with relatives. I have a family member on the opposite side of the marriage that knew me for many, many years. And only recently, when I posted something to Facebook that was pro-GMO, she actually initiated a discussion, very conservative, and she actually took my opinion and said, you know what, I'm going to be ostracized for this, but I'm going to talk to my friends about this, and I'm going to be willing because I trust you, I know you. And that made a big difference. So I wasn't necessarily pushing my agenda, but somebody saw my opinion and said, look, okay, I will listen, and I will modify my opinion, and I will support you because I know you and I trust you. So sometimes we need to look at the opportunity when you take somebody off guard by expressing some opinion. You take that opportunity to talk a little bit more. And sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes I started a discussion at one of these conventions, and this lady sitting beside me started talking about well, nobody believes that. And I said, well, actually, I do. And let me tell you why. And I started talking to her, and then the program started, and I said, I'd like to continue this discussion with you, if you don't mind. She turned her back on me and walked away, and I never saw her again. I was like, oh, well, lost that one. So the other thing is more difficult. What do we do when we start facing hostility? And I say indirect hostility to start with. Indirect hostility means that you're in a group of people and somebody is anti-GMO, and they're venting and they're angry, but they're not discussing it directly with you. It's not like they're directly attacking you. So it's kind of an indirect situation where you're not being the target of the hostility. And there's sometimes we just need to say, okay, indirect, I'm going to participate in this discussion. I'm going to identify myself. Okay, I'm from Idaho now. I grew up in Delaware. And using a sense of humor, I start by saying, hey, I'm one of those East Coast liberals. I lived in Idaho now 25 years, which is longer than I've ever lived on the East Coast now. But, you start by making a little bit of fun of yourself to establish some sort of connection. And this situation often made me mad. I don't know, I might be dating myself here a little bit, okay? But I remember this specifically when there was the presidential debate with George Bush and Senator Kerry. And what it was that I heard was that George Bush kind of attacked Senator Kerry and said, you're one of those East Coast liberals. You're a Massachusetts liberal, just like that other one from your state. Only a liberal senator from Massachusetts would say that 49% increase in funding for education was not enough. And what did Kerry do? Did he stand there and say, yes, I am? And if being a liberal means defense of education, it means defense of people in need, and it means X, Y, Z, then I'm one of those liberals and I'm proud of it. What did he do? He tucked his tail between his legs and avoided the eye contact, avoided the conversation, and moved on to the next question. A perfect opportunity to say, that's who I am, and then that's what I stand for, and I'm proud of it. Not that I'm embarrassed. So that has always stuck in my mind. I don't think we have to apologize for who we are. So the other thing I need to emphasize to me is it's important that we're honest. I think we have to balance open-mindedness with a healthy dose of skepticism, and bringing in some of the conversation that we had with Jack Abobo. He said, yes, we're very skeptical of other people's research when it doesn't agree with our own point of view. But at the same time, we could be skeptical of the stuff that does agree with our own. We have to, as scientists, we have to be skeptical of everything and look at everything with that scientific eye. I think that's being skeptical is really, really important. But I don't want to neglect being open-minded. Okay, there's also that thought that the people that are standing up for themselves and standing up for what they believe in, sometimes it goes against the grain of the current body of knowledge. But that's what science is all about. You know, always taking in, being willing to consider things that initially seem really stupid, but consider it and start trying to understand where those people are getting their information from or how they're developing that information. I like to keep a sense of humor. So it's harder to get mad at ourselves, and it's harder to get mad at other people when we take ourselves with a grain of salt. A little bit of self-deprecating humor is always really fun. What are whiteheads in wheat? What causes whiteheads? So what are whiteheads? Whiteheads in wheat, well, that happens when you have the straw cut off from either pathogens or some things cut off that circulation or the uptake of nutrients, and often it's a foot rot fungus, and that head ends up being, you know, blonde and empty. Like my teenage daughter, you wouldn't believe what she did the other day, you know. Her and her friend Sarah, they went to school and they left the car running all day. It ran out of gas. They parked, you know, okay, so seriously, it happened. I'm not joking. But the good thing is that, okay, you start opening some conversation. You let people know who you are. You let people know that you're human, that you have a family, and that you're approachable. So wherever I can, my daughter's not a teenager anymore. She's now 26. So she would probably be very embarrassed if I, you know, continue to use this example, but it works. And then we get into some situations where you're talking with colleagues. I was walking around the park, taking my normal 10 a.m. walk, getting a good break, getting exercise, and she starts running off about cancer. There's so many more cancers in the world than there used to be. Yeah, well, there's a lot of things that factor into the increase in cancer, and it's not necessarily generally due to agricultural pesticides, but people want to blame them on agricultural pesticides. And so you can use that conversation, if they're willing to listen, to start talking about the factors associated with that are completely independent of agricultural pesticides. That's one example. Another example happens to be this one. If you look at the death from Alzheimer's and the amount of GE corn and soybeans, that's kind of alarming. You're right? Okay, you look at that and say, oh my gosh, the correlation there between the deaths from Alzheimer's and the percentage of corn and soybeans that are GE that is being grown is tremendous. I think that's nerve-wracking. I think I need to be a little bit frightened. Well, let's look at another one. If you take a look at the number of children with autism plotted against the increase in glyphosate use in corn and soybeans, that's alarming. Stop, take a look at these correlations. But at the same time, we could point out that correlation is not causation, and in fact, we can please ask Nicolas Cage, somebody, to stop appearing in films. Okay? So, really, drowning is not funny, but Nicolas Cage needs to be made aware of the fact that the correlation is there. So again, I'm not saying that we need to ignore information. We absolutely do not need to ignore anything. But we do need to understand some of the scientific principles. You know, the per capita cheese consumption is correlated with the number of people who died by becoming tangled in their bed sheets. So, yeah, and then the last one is the divorce rate in Maine is correlated with the per capita consumption of margarine. Thank goodness they allowed butter to be now on the healthy food list, because I happen to really like butter. So all I'm saying is take the information that you've been presented and don't shut your mind down. Be aware, but also be aware of the scientific principle and how we approach some of the information that we've been giving. So the hardest thing to do is direct hostility. How do we deal with direct hostility? And, you know, I have lots of good answers, but it would help if I could only follow my own answers. I'm out in the field the other day with a guy that has insisted that this particular seed treatment gives you 17 bushels an acre increase in yield. Hey, sounds good. I just happened to do several studies that indicated it did nothing. It was seed priming. And so, but I kept my mouth shut. And then one of the guys in the field said, "Hey, Juliet, you've done some studies on that. What did you find?" Well, I did several studies, and indeed I found that there was no statistically significant increase with this particular seed treatment. And the guy who was defending it says, "Well, I've got 3 years of data that shows that it does work." What did I do? "Well, I've got 3 years of data that says it doesn't work." Like, no. That wasn't the right thing to do. We tend to respond with emotion and anger, and that's not what we should be doing. So I have to agree with Jack. Identify your goal. Are we trying to educate? We're trying to inform? Yeah, but people don't want you to attack their core beliefs. And when you do, they shut you down. Boom. So do you walk away? What do? I just think we need to be able to speak with confidence and authority. Be honest. You know your subject, hopefully. Don't be a know-it-all. Admit that you may not ever be able to change their mind. My sister and her stevia and the all-natural sugar. What sugar? Isn't sugar regular sugar? Isn't that natural? I think sometimes I need to go to the unnatural food store. But we do need to be empathetic and plant seeds for future questions. Be willing to be approachable. We can turn it back around. A friend of mine had a conversation in the field where he was doing seed treatment trials, and the one guy says, "Well, you just don't know what you're looking for. There should be significant results in the seed treatment. You don't know what you're looking for." Well, here's the plot map. No seed treatments. I'd be willing for you to just rate it yourself and tell me what you find. If there are differences in vigor, if there's differences in yield, you just do the rating yourself, and then we'll do the statistical analysis. He couldn't tell, of course, right? Engage the opposition. I have a graduate student now that is no longer with me, but he was selling that seed treatment that the other guy was convinced would give you 17 bushels an acre increase. It's like, oh, let's make it your graduate student project. Let's see if you can tell the difference in your seed treatments from the product that you're selling versus the other non-treated controls and the so-called control of just a water priming event. Couldn't tell. The last thing is step back. Okay? This is a really good one, and I've learned a lot. You get angry. You're attacked. Your research is attacked. Stop. Don't say a word because your emotion's going to come out first. And before you call that person an idiot, stop. And just step back a minute, even walk away, but say, "Hold on a minute. Let me think about that a minute, and I'll get back to you." It will not hurt you to walk away. Reformulate that emotional response and respond intelligently and kindly. And I think that's extremely important. And the last couple of things I want to emphasize is sometimes you're just never going to win. Okay? Again, when you're attacking, my daughter-in-law is a deep-seated believer in her organic and her Whole Foods market. Okay, I'm fine. And I do offend her. I'm sorry. Because I'm also deeply believing in the safety of our food. But Paul's going to get into this more. Step back and ask, why do you believe in that? What are the facts associated that led you to believe in your XYZ anti-GMO, anti-fungicide use, pro-whatever? But it's all answering as simply and honestly as you can. But decline a fight. Walk away, because if you engage in the fight, you're the one that looks like as idiotic as the next person. We're not here to fight, we're here to discuss. And always choose respect. So it might not be all of the answers, but at least I can share a little bit of my experience with you. So, Paul.